So hi, everybody. Really excited.
It's Mike and Mike. Not sure if that rings a bell. I feel like I've heard that before. I can't decide where.
So quick intros.
You could have clapped longer, by the way. I could have used a little more. I mean, I came all the way here from downtown, for crying out loud. The traffic was ridiculous. No, let's just establish some ground rules. I just heard a Go Jets. I had to put a rider in that I'm not talking about the Jets anymore because it's a freaking catastrophe. Is there anyone here from the Jets? Oh, really? Listen, I've lived and died with this franchise for 58 years. It's as painful as literally in my entire life. There is nothing that causes me more anxiety and agita.
Can you give people the story about your son in the Jets, just so people get the perspective?
My son, the last time the New York Jets played a home playoff game, my son had just been born. He was an infant. I remember the debate over whether I could go to the game or not because we had a newborn in the house. This June, he graduated from college. And watching the game this Sunday, it makes me sad. We're sitting on the couch. He's like, Dad, if we get one stop here. And I was like, oh, don't do it. Just don't do it. So he's got the same affliction, unfortunately, I do. Okay, go ahead and introduce me.
So this is Mike Greenberg. Thank you, Mike. But yes, if you pay attention to the sports world, which we all do, he's one of the faces of ESPN, from Get Up in the Morning to Sunday NFL Countdown. Obviously has done lots of things on the radio over his career, including the Mike and Mike show, which was a big one for a long time. He's a best-selling author and has recently written a book, which some of you will get as a prize later. As ticket manager, you know everyone likes to get prizes at the end of every panel, so you'll see some of that. So we're very excited to have him here. And I'm certainly excited to be here. I've been part of the ticket manager family in different ways for 12 years. When I was at MasterCard on the brand side, MasterCard became a customer and is still a happy customer with Ticket Manager 12 years later. And now I have my own consulting shop. I'm proud to say Ticket Manager is a client. So really excited to be here with Mike. And we're really going to focus on storytelling. Certainly something that is key to the sports world, and certainly something that's key to brands and teams, and a piece of everyone's day-to-day life in this room. So with that, Mike did, as I say, recently write a best-selling book. It was about the Mount Rushmore for every franchise. So if you're not a history buff, Mount Rushmore is actually 4 presidents. And so I wanted to start there. Mike, whether it's personally or professionally, what is your Mount Rushmore of sports stories?
So I thought about this a little bit because you told me you were going to ask. So first, it has to begin. Well, I mean, that's not a normal question, I guess. So it has to begin with Michael Jordan. So I start. Anyone here from Chicago? You can clap or whatever. Either way. Whatever form of acknowledgement is fine with me. So I began my career before I got to ESPN. I worked locally in Chicago. I went to Northwestern. I got a job in Chicago. And in 1992, we launched a radio station called The Score, WSCR, The Score, where Michael's wife, ironically and coincidentally, used to work. The station launched, and in what can only be described as one of the great fortunate circumstances of happenstance in my life, and I will just say as an aside, any highly successful person, if you ask them how they got to be where they are, if they do not include good fortune in their answer, they are either lying to themselves or they're lying to you. In my case, I had a million different elements of good fortune, and one of them is they started this all-sports station and they didn't hire anyone to cover the teams. We had talk show hosts, we had update people, we had producers, which is what I was. I was behind the scenes. As a producer, I was screening phone calls and things like that. But the Bulls were the biggest story in the world. The Bulls were the Beatles in the early 90s. And I managed to convince the program director that we should have someone who goes out to the games and covers the games at night, which I volunteered to do after my shift. And then the playoffs started, and I said, we really should have someone traveling with this team. And in what can only be described as a miracle, that someone wound up being me. I was 24 years old, and I was on the road with the Bulls and Michael Jordan, and so I wound up covering Michael almost every day for 3.5 years, inclusive of when he went down to Sarasota and then Birmingham to play baseball. So any deep story about sports for me begins with him. It was, I saw up close and personal what true greatness is. And look, I'm fascinated by a group like this. I'm so pleased to be here. I'm hoping that an event like this, all the different elements of sports business, which I have seen explode over the 35 years that I've been in the industry, I'm hoping that at an event like this, I can learn as much as I can divulge or explain. But anyway, Michael, for me, everything I think I know about greatness, everything I know about competitiveness, everything I know about mental toughness, everything I know about a championship mentality, I learned from witnessing it up close and personal from him. So I'll give you my one quick favorite Michael story. And that is in 1993, the Bulls and Knicks played one of the great 6-game series of all time. Anyone old enough to have watched it will remember it forever. That was the Charles Smith series. That was all of that. Anyway, during that series, at one point, the teams would practice on the off days in the same arena where the games were being played so that the media could easily get both of them. So the Knicks came to shoot around, and the storyline in Madison Square Garden, the storyline amongst all the Knicks players is Jordan's getting all the calls. Jordan gets all the calls. He gets beneficial treatment from the officials, and Jordan gets all the calls. So they leave. Now the Bulls come to practice, and all of us reporters go racing to Michael. And I want to be the one to ask him the question because I know it's going to get a great response. And I'm thinking, oh, whoever, is this going to be on SportsCenter, all that stuff. And so we get over and I said, Michael, you should know the Knicks are all saying that you get all the calls. And there's like a hushed silence. And everyone's waiting for the response. And he looked right at me and he said, so? And I've told that story a million times, including at graduations, because I think it is such a valuable lesson for all people. There are going to be a lot of people out there in your life who offer a variety of completely irrelevant opinions about you and about the way you go about doing your job, and the best way to respond to them is by just looking them in the eye and saying, so? That's what Michael did. If it was good enough for him, it was good enough for me. So I have a million Michael stories, but that's the one I'll tell here in the moment. So you want 4 stories. I would say my favorite day, to say something nice about the Jets, and I wrote this in my first book, which was called Why My Wife Thinks I'm an Idiot, by the way, which is a title everyone always likes, that my favorite Jet game I ever went to, and I've seen them play many playoff games and all that, but there was a day in 2005 that we went to see the Jets play, and for the first time I sat here, and my then 3-year-old son Steven sat here, and my dad sat here. And that is a day, as I wrote, you don't get anywhere else. You don't get that at a Broadway show. You don't get that at a movie. You don't get that anywhere else. There is something about a bond that is created by sitting together at a sporting event that is very special and unique. And it's not true for everyone. People who don't have sports in their blood, in their soul, the way some of us do, don't get it. I mean, and there's no reason they should. I'm not criticizing them. But as I always say, there's nothing in the world better than investing everything into something that means absolutely nothing. So that's a day that I always remember. We were talking backstage about my alma mater, Northwestern University. The first time we ever made, our men's team ever made the NCAA tournament, we played in Salt Lake City, Utah. My entire family flew out. We went to the game, and we won a thriller against Vanderbilt, last-second win. That was unbelievable. We went back to the team hotel, and the players came back, and we were all celebrating with my kids, who at that point, both of my children have now graduated from Northwestern. They both were always wanted to go there, and at that point, they were high school age. So that's an unforgettable day that I will never forget. And then I guess, I mean, there's a million other things that I could name, but I suppose I would say there was a day that I played tennis with Chris Evert. So when I was growing up in the 1970s, Chris Evert was the first woman I ever loved. And I say that on behalf of everyone who was a boy in the 1970s. And so the USTA called me, because I'm a tennis fan and I used to play a little tennis. and they called me, this was about 2008 or 2009, whatever year it was, that the mixed doubles at the U.S. Open became a true open. It used to be you had to qualify for it, right? But they made the mixed doubles truly an open championship. And they wanted some publicity for that, so they said, will you come play a match, and we'll get you anyone you want as your partner, and it'll be for some publicity. So I, half-jokingly, said, get me Chrissy. The next thing I know, they call me back, Chrissy's coming up from Boca. So Chris Everett and I go to play this match in Flushing, and I'm expecting that we're going to play like Regis Philbin and Martina Navratilova. I don't know. They put us in the freaking draw. So we're playing against people who actually won a match in the U.S. Open. And Chrissy was one of the greatest players and champions our country ever produced, but she was 50 at this point. I'm me. So I thought the fact that I fought as hard as I fought was quite impressive. But the moment from it that I will never forget, I'm returning serve. Guy hits me this spin serve that bounces. There's no way for it. I can stand up. Looks like it's going to go this way. Winds up bouncing that way. I flail at it like this, and the ball, excuse my language, hits Chrissy right in the ass. I went, and boom, like that. And that's on YouTube. You can find that if you want to see it. And it's probably a tragic statement about my athletic career, but it's probably my apex. So off the top of my head, those would be the first 4 stories that jump to mind.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about those 4 stories is how different they all are, right? And there are so many great stories across the sporting universe that brands here deal with and try and tell their story, teams try and tell their story, and then obviously people in the media try and cover the big stories. From a media standpoint, what makes a big story in sports? What are some of the qualifications or the things that it has to have?
So when I was thinking about that, I don't know if this answers the question, but here's what my mind went to. What I've told the team that works behind the scenes on our talk show on Get Up, I've said this, they would roll their eyes if they were sitting here now because they've heard me say this 10,000 times. We don't cover sports. We cover people. Those people play sports. That's what fans are attracted to and interested in. The sports have always to some degree been, and certainly now more than ever, are the ultimate reality television. It is reality TV, but it's actually real, and it's happening in front of you. And people who have dedicated their entire lives to being great at something are displaying that greatness for you in a competitive fashion every single day. And in every single game, there is a winner and a loser. There's legitimate blood and sweat and tears. There's legitimate agony and legitimate ecstasy. And so that's what I thought of when you sent me some questions you might want to ask me. That's where my mind went, is that it's about the people. So what are the things that you remember? You don't remember the gold medal. You remember Mary Lou Retton standing there on one foot. You don't remember the score of the game or even who we played in Lake Placid in 1980, but you remember Herb Brooks and his speech, and you remember Al Michaels saying, "Do you believe in miracles?" It's about people, and so it's about Michael and all of his moments. And sometimes it's about the opposite. It's about Bill Buckner. It's about, I've often said, one of the most overlooked things about sports is the courage that it requires to be a player, because whether you know it or not, you run the risk of always being remembered for your worst moment. And so, as an example of that, I would say, if I say Scott Norwood, what comes to mind? If I say Bill Buckner, what comes to mind? I don't even know the name of the kicker for the Giants this past weekend. I can't remember his name, but you know what I'm talking about. That involves a certain amount of courage. So, Michael, I don't know if this fully answers the question, but it's what I thought of when you asked it to me. What makes a story memorable? What makes a story, to use the parlance of the day, go viral? What makes it sticky? It's about the people. At the end of the day, it's not about there's always going to be games. There's always going to be a winner and a loser. There's always going to be hits, runs, and errors. At the end of the day, what makes things resonate are the people.
So speaking of people in the news, obviously there's been some breaking news this morning on a big sports story, and some of us have already covered it on national television. So why don't we talk a little bit about that and maybe just give people some insight into the process. So you're putting the show together, this story breaks, what happened?
So literally, we are sitting in a room and in our set this morning to do Get Up. We go on the air at 8 o'clock, 8:00. And we're sort of getting ready. I got Adam Schefter here, Dan Orlovsky here, Andrew Hawkins here, and the bussin' guys, Taylor Lewan and Will Compton over here. So we got a jammed set. And we are planning to do all this football, tons of football. We start with the Victor Wembanyama highlight. He went nuts last night. If any of you saw it, he plays a game with which I am not familiar. And so we are all set. And then, you know, as the expression goes, man plans and God laughs. I hear in our producer is a woman named Ashley Colley, and she says in my ear, Greeny, go to Sham's Twitter. I just want you to see what's there. Because we have some news that we might be getting to pretty soon. So I look, and there it is, that Terry Rozier, an NBA player, has been arrested as part of this FBI-led investigation into gambling. So just Greeny, have that in the back of your head. You know, we're not ready to do the story yet, but we're certainly gonna do it. As the morning develops, before we even got to it, we find out that Chauncey Billups, the head coach of the Portland Trailblazers, an active head coach who coached a game last night in Portland, was also arrested today. Now, the reporting from ABC News, as of the last time I checked my phone, and don't quote me on this because all of this is fluid, but the reporting from ABC News was that was part of a different investigation that actually involved a high-stakes poker ring, not gambling involving actual NBA games. I don't know if, for all I know, that has already changed because it took me a long time to get here, and so I haven't checked it in the last hour or so. But so that information is sort of being fed to me, and in the world of technology that we live in today, I'm sort of following it real time in commercial breaks and whenever I have a second to look down at my phone. And then so that we do go with the story, someone writes up a little synopsis of what we know, and I read it off the teleprompter, and I say, we'll have much more on this as soon as we can. And then I get in my ear, Shams is ready, he's coming on, so I go live to Shams, and Shams comes on, and he details the story as best as he knows it. And I said, we need to be talking about this. If this is a huge breaking story in American sports, I think people in America want to put the TV on ESPN, and they want us to be talking about it. So even though we didn't have anyone there who was expert in the legal part of it, or in the NBA for that matter, I had my whole crew. Most of them are former NFL players, and we just talked about how the views on gambling in sports have evolved and changed over the years. To take a quick off ramp here, when I first started hosting talk shows in the mid '90s in Chicago at the Score, I was campaigning at that time for legalized sports gambling. I've always been a proponent of legalized sports gambling. And so to put a ribbon on today's conversation, I think this is something we all just have to get used to. Like, this is going to be a reality in sports today, that you're going to occasionally have these events take place in major college and professional sports in America. I don't think it is a crisis. I don't think that the games are rigged. I don't think that we have to, I certainly don't think we need to eradicate legal gambling, not that I think that could be put back in the tube anyway. But I do think we have to just become accustomed to the fact that every now and again, we're going to find out that there was a player doing this or that, or a coach doing this or that. I think that's just something we have to get used to living with. But anyway, that was sort of the evolution of the morning. And then the reporting obviously continues through the day. And as I said, there may have been developments in it that I haven't seen yet.
So before I ask another question, just a little housekeeping. You can ask Mike a question if you'd like. You can text the number behind me. We've had some audience questions come in, and certainly the team here will get them to me, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. So
how cool is that?
And I think it speaks to something that is very important to Ticket Manager, which is technology, and you mentioned that also. Ticket Manager's trying to make sure they have top-of-the-line technology in everything they do. As you've been at ESPN for almost 3 decades now, not to age you, how has...
I'm plenty aged all by myself.
How has technology changed how you cover stories?
Well, okay, I'll give you 2 stories. The first of them is this. I mentioned I used to host talk shows locally in Chicago on the radio. In those days, we would give out 2 phone numbers. One was the number to call in and state an opinion. The second, I swear I'm not making this up, was a fax number where you could fax us your opinions. And we would have an intern or a production assistant run to the other room where the fax machine was and rip them off the fax machine and bring them into us, and we would read people's faxes. Now, this is in one person's career, all right? It's me. It's not Edward R. Murrow I'm talking about. This was me who did this. So just think how ridiculously dated that is. I'm looking at the faces of some of the younger-looking people in the room who are trying to find out what a fax machine is.
They're Googling that now, yeah.
Now, no one's Googling anymore. That's all AI. Anyway, but the point is so that's an example of how much technology has advanced, and I've tried very hard over the course of my career to stay with it. I think people my age in my industry and yours, and I think every industry, can be divided into 2 groups. There are those who sit around and bitch about how much better things used to be, and then there are those who evolve with the times. And if you want to remain relevant at the age of 58 or however old you are, then you have to evolve with the times, because no matter how much better you may think things were before, they're not going back there. And I've had the benefit of having, kids, and I'm very close to my nephews, and they're all in their 20s now. So I think I have sort of I'm able to see the world a little bit through the eyes of younger people, and I get a bit of a sense of how it works. As far as a very specific example of how technology works for me, when I was hosting radio talk shows, which I was up until January of this year, what I will do is, I left my phone with my agent over there, Marco, but if I had my phone, I will host a show and I'll have my phone open and I will have my Twitter mentions open. And I'll just have it sitting there. Whenever I bring up a new topic, whenever I go into a topic, I'll start it with a take or a thought or a monologue or whatever it is, and I will watch the mentions. And if I see 6 of them trickle in, I know this isn't working. I'm not making a connection. This isn't touching a nerve. No one gives a damn. Move on. And if I see they come flying in faster than I can read them, then I know it's working. And it doesn't make any difference to me what they're saying. I don't care if you agree or disagree or like or don't like.
You just care that they care.
I just care that you care. Because people I keep digressing, but I am the master of using 1,000 words where 9 would have sufficed. So I'm now answering a question you didn't ask me. But the people who want to do what I do for a living I've always said, you use the wrong word, but with the right letter. They all think we're doing communications, but it's not. I mean, communications is much too broad of a term. The word is actually connection. We're trying to make a connection with our audience. That may be true I see a lot of people nodding, so that may very well be true in the various different industries in which you all work. But in what I'm doing, that's definitively what it is. You have to make a connection with your audience. And if you do that, you have to speak with them, not to them. There's all of these sort of fundamental rules of broadcasting. But that's what it's about. So if I see those mentions come flying in, I know I've made a connection. A connection has been made here. These people are now actively partaking in this conversation with me because they're interested enough in what I'm talking about to do so. So that's probably the best example of how technology has directly impacted the way I do my job.
So we talked about the change in technology. Something that you've done a lot in your career is you've changed formats from TV to radio to writing books. In terms of making that connection, how does that change based on the format you're participating in at that time?
So that's a good question. So the best answer I can give you is it really doesn't change. The fundamental underlying reality of all of it is you need to establish that connection. You need to make a connection. Now, people are meeting you in a different place. If they're reading a book, they're meeting you in a different place than they would be if they're listening to you on a radio or a podcast, or if they're watching you on television. So the means of delivery change, but I think that the basic principles remain the same. You want to be talking about people. You want to be talking about people that your audience cares about. You want to be doing it in a way that is compelling, that people will connect to, that will make them want to be a part of the conversation. When it comes to the difference between radio and TV, which people ask me all the time, I always say, here's how I would sum them up. It is much harder to do television badly than it is to do radio badly. Doing radio badly is the easiest thing in the entire world. Turn a microphone on and start talking. That's radio. It usually sucks. Doing television badly is harder because there's a lot of other things going on, and in theory, unless you want to be the worst at it that has ever lived, you need to be in some semblance of sync with a director and a producer and other people, and video is rolling and someone's talking in your ear and all sorts of things are happening. So doing television badly is harder than doing radio badly, but doing radio well is much harder than doing television well, for almost exactly the same reason. Because in television, there's so much other stuff going on. Like, as an example, at the gym that I work out in, they always have Bloomberg Business on. That's how I know everything that's going on in the world that isn't sports. One of the monitors always has Bloomberg on. And there are it's on without the sound. And any of you who have ever watched Bloomberg, you know the anchor takes up like maybe 10% of the screen, and the rest of it is just a whole bunch of information. So I just sort of walk by and I read it. I'm like, oh, tariffs, I don't know, oil tanker explosion. I mean, whatever it is. The point is, there's so many other ways that television programming can make a connection with people, can be interesting. There's so many other reasons you might watch. A radio show, doing a radio show well, what Mike and I did for 18 years, that is literally just having a conversation, in our case amongst two people, that as many as 18 million people might want to listen to at a given time. And that's much different and much harder and requires a lot of different, I think a different level of skill and talent and energy and thoughts. So that would be the way I would describe the difference in those media. And then writing books is just excruciating. There's nothing in the world better than having written a book, and there's nothing in the world worse than actually writing one.
So two good questions while we were talking came in from the audience. Very different questions, but I think both relevant to our discussion. One is related to the gambling news or potential gambling news from today. What are your thoughts on sort of the overall fear of conspiracy theories, games are rigged, games are scripted, and all of that sort of taking on a new meaning with gambling at the forefront?
I'm not worried about it. As I touched on briefly when we talked about it, I think we just have to get used to the fact that there are going to be occasional issues, and I genuinely believe that's what they are. I've heard a million different conspiracy theories over the course of my life covering sports. I hear them from audience members all the time. In my opinion, like, do you know what? Many of you probably do know this. I believe the revenues of the National Football League annually are $22 or $23 billion. Is that right? Are we really risking $23 billion if you're Roger Goodell to try and script that the Chiefs get in there instead of the Bills, which might influence the overall television rating by 1/1,000,000th of a point, which might change the revenues of the league by $11.95? It just is nonsensical. I think we ascribe an element, sometimes in our emotional reaction to things, we ascribe an element of stupidity to people who are clearly not stupid people. So do I believe that there are issues? Do I believe that there are players out there who sometimes will have a stake in making sure their prop bets go under, and that's easy to manipulate, which is what Terry Rozier did? Yes. Do I think that is going to be an occasional problem that we're going to have to deal with in sports going forward? Yes. Do I believe the games in a larger sense, generally speaking, are rigged, scripted, or otherwise? Absolutely not. I don't believe that for 1 second.
Yeah, and obviously important that it stays that way, and the vast majority of people believe you, which at least thus far I think is the case.
Yeah, look, I mean, if you're Adam Silver, you're having a tough day. But the good news is Adam Silver is a really smart guy, and he has at his disposal all of the resources imaginable to address this however he sees fit. I wouldn't give him any advice because he'll have 10 better ideas than I will ever have, but they'll handle it, and this will get and has been and will get handled in Major League Baseball, and the NHL, and the NBA, and the NFL, and wherever it is. Again, they'll deal with this. They'll deal with it, strictly and strongly because they have to. And I think people might go to jail. I don't want to speculate about what the results of all this might be, because for all I know, there's still more to come in this investigation. But I am not especially worried that this is going to turn into a tornado that engulfs sports as we know them.
So obviously it gets to the integrity of the game, and then there's, of course, the integrity of the media. The other question from the audience was, let's say today's news was around the NFL and not the NBA, and knowing that ESPN and the NFL are getting deeper into business together, how does that get handled? Is that a concern? And all of those sorts of things.
Well, I can only speak for myself. Look, we are. You couldn't be more in business with the NBA than we are in. We televised the NBA Finals and have forever. I hosted NBA Countdown for 2 seasons. We last night debuted Shaq and Charles and all those guys on our network for the first time. You can't be more we're not any more in business with the NFL than we are with the NBA. And I can tell you that no one told me I had to be careful about what I said today or any other day. So I think, are there areas where those lines sometimes are complicated? Probably, but I can say in all candor and without 1 second of hesitation that in my 29 years at ESPN, never once has an executive said to me, "You cannot say this," or you must say this based upon a business relationship that we have with a league or a team or anybody else.
So you mentioned earlier, Jets game, dad's there, son's there. As we think about stories and the power of them, as you can imagine, we talk about tickets sometimes at Ticket Manager. When you think about having a ticket to an event, what's a story you can share with us?
So this isn't really a ticket, but when I was covering the Bulls, there's a very famous game when Michael Jordan went away to play baseball. Then he came back. He came back in the spring of 1995. And his third game back was here in New York at the Garden. And it's the legendary double nickel game. He scored 55 points in that game and wins it with a pass to Bill Wennington for a dunk at the very end. It's one of the most electric, unforgettable sporting events that I can ever remember. So I'm walking. I've got my media credential. I'm covering the Bulls. I'm from New York, but I was working and living in Chicago, so I have a media credential, and I'm walking into the media entrance at Madison Square Garden, which is on 33rd Street and 8th Avenue. And I'm walking in, and some guy just sort of yells at me, "I'll give you $5,000 for your media credential." So I watched the game from a bar across the street. No, I didn't. I didn't sell it to him, but I should have. No, tickets to sporting events are there. As I said before, when I talked about my dad and my son and me at a game, like they are a key that unlocks magical things. Like there are things that only happen in sporting arenas. And again, it doesn't resonate that way for everyone, but for those of us for whom it does, there's nothing more special. There's nothing more magical. There's nothing more important. There's no more meaningful connection. There are no memories that resonate more greatly. And the ticket that's probably a good, feel free to use that. The ticket is sort of your key to unlocking those memories.
We're recording all of this.
Unlocking that magic, yeah. I want to make sure that I get some compensation should you use that, because it's brilliant. Anyway, so yeah, that's what, a ticket is being able to walk into that building, I was walking into that building that night, and that was the center of the universe. Like when Michael was playing at the Garden that night, that was the center of the universe. And someone wasn't kidding. They would have, and this was 1995, so that's probably the equivalent of, I don't know how many thousands of dollars it is now, but that person would gladly have given me thousands of dollars just to be part of that magic, to have been part of that experience, to have been, as they say in Hamilton, in the room where it happens. And you know, I'm as I think back over the blessings of my life, having been in the room where it happened so many times is high on my list.
So obviously when Michael Jordan's making a comeback and playing at Madison Square Garden, you have a sense that's going to be a big story. What's one time in your career where you really didn't think something was going to be nearly as big as it wound up becoming, and why?
That's a good question. So I think we live in a different world now. So the way I thought about that when I saw that question was I think about the things that go viral, and I wonder why they do. Like and there's a mystery to that I don't fully understand, and there are probably things that have to do with algorithms and whatnot that I know literally nothing about. But the ones that I think about most, I know this isn't a direct answer to your question, but it's what I thought about when I saw the question, is the crowd shots that go viral. People become famous without having actually done anything but sit in their seat and watch a game and react honestly in the moment, like the legendary crying Piccolo girl from Villanova. And the one, so when Northwestern played the aforementioned game in Salt Lake City, we won our first round game against Vanderbilt. 2 days later, we played Gonzaga. They were the #1 seed, and we lost. And we lost on one of the worst calls in the history of sports. A player on Gonzaga,
but not a
literally
conspiracy.
put his hand up. It was not a conspiracy, although you would never have been able to convince me of that in that moment. But no, I mean, it was just a terrible call. A guy literally put his hand up through the bottom of the rim to block a shot. It wasn't called. By definition, that's goaltending. It wasn't called. Our coach went crazy. Chris Collins got a technical. We were mounting this big comeback, whatever. We wound up losing the game. You have all, so the athletic director at that time was a guy named Jim Phillips. He's now the commissioner of the ACC. We became very close family friends. His son, Johnny, was probably 11 at that time, and he had braces and a Northwestern jersey on, and he's crying, screaming at the officials over this call, and he is, to this day, Northwestern crying kid. He's one of the most famous memes that there's ever been. When I introduced my nephew to him, my nephew said, and I quote, "I'm a big fan." And all he did was sit there crying at a sporting event because he was 11 and his father's team had just gotten hosed and they were going to lose, and it was horrible. So that's what I thought of when I saw that question. I don't know if it is a direct answer, but I think sometimes about how those things, what is it about those moments that makes them live forever? And I don't really have a good answer, but those are the ones that confound me. The sports stories, you usually can see it coming. You know it's not going to be a great game. The game, Giants and Broncos this past Sunday, you're watching that game, and at some point you say to yourself, this is a classic, right? This is a masterpiece. This is epic theater, regardless of how it ends. And it ended in only the most ridiculous way, but a way that magnified it. Last year, when Jaden Daniels completes that, the Hail Mary against the Bears, I happened to be watching that game. My nephews, we have a theater room downstairs in the building I live in New York, and we had the room, and my nephews, who are from Chicago, had all their buddies over. There's probably 12, 20-year-old Chicago kids watching that game, and the deathly silence in that room when that ball was caught is something I'll never forget. So you see those coming. You know those are going to be remembered. It's the little moments that go viral. I mean, Johnny Phillips is now probably 25 years old. This happened a very long time ago, but people still will always think of him as the Northwestern crying kid. I find that fascinating.
So maybe moving to the brand perspective a little bit. A lot of people in the room work for different brands that spend a lot of time, effort, and money in the sports arena, if you will. Knowing that you've done this on radio, on television, brands sometimes really do a nice job integrating into the story. Maybe other times they force their way in. What have you seen that sort of differentiates brands that are doing it effectively?
So everyone has to have a claim to fame. I believe my claim to fame is I think it is very possible that I have read more commercials than any other human being in the history of the United States of America. I hosted Mike and Mike for 18 years, 4 hours a day, every single day. If you had ever seen one of our rundowns, the number of reads that we had, the amount of complaints I would get about how many things I was reading and how many things were sponsored. So I think I'm an expert on this subject. And what I've always said, and what I would say when I would meet with our partners and all that, look, what I'm running is not a show, I'm running a business. A show is a hobby. When you guys get involved, that's how it becomes a business. My job is to deliver your message in a way that is two things: organic and authentic. And that's what the game is about. So if you're working with someone like me, the best way for that to be effective is to enable me to deliver your message. My job is to deliver your message. It's not what I want what is your brand? Say it again. Capital One, perfect example. You got Spike Lee and you got Jim Nance getting sawed in half, and you got all of these people. You got a message. Whatever your message is, you want that message delivered. That's probably a bad example because those are TV commercials. But if you have someone reading Capital One copy on a radio show or in a more controlled environment than Spike and Charles and those guys, it's your message. It's not mine. My job is to deliver your message in the way you want it delivered. I'm telling you, as a veteran of having done this for 35 years, that the way it works is if the audience doesn't feel like I've stopped what I was doing to deliver your message. So if I have to say, and we'll continue talking about the arrests and the gambling probe in the NBA in just a matter of a few minutes. It's 16 minutes before the hour. And now this word from Capital One. That, to me, is a great cue for my audience to tune out. That's an excellent opportunity. We call them off ramps. That's a good opportunity for someone to take an off ramp. Let's listen to a song. Let's change the channel, because I know that I'm losing what I came here for, and I'm being delivered a message. If I am able to seamlessly, and this is something I've tried very hard to do over the course of my career, and really good broadcasters will do this for you, seamlessly integrate your message into what I'm otherwise doing so that it doesn't stop. I don't stop what I'm doing, start your message, deliver your message, end your message, reset and start over again. Then I think has a chance to be the most effective, to resonate, to be paid attention to. At the end of the day, your message, if people listen to it, will resonate. You're spending countless amounts of hours and money in order to know the exact right words to use, the exact right message to deliver. We've done all of this research, and we got focus groups, and we got all that, and these are exactly the things we need people to hear in order to maximize their usage of our product. But if they don't listen to it, then it doesn't make any difference how good the tagline is or how effectively produced the messaging was. So to me, that's the secret sauce. It's all about allowing the content to deliver your message in a way that feels organic and feels authentic. So people don't say, oh, I'm being sold Capital One right now. Instead, they listen to the show, and that gets woven in, and somewhere in the back of their subconscious mind, when they're walking to their office after they park the car, they think, I think I'm going to apply for a Capital One card. It seems like, I don't know why I got that idea, but for some reason I think that sounds like a pretty good idea to me. That's where somewhere in there is where the magic lies.
So I know your agents here in the back. You may have a new request stream of coming into C-level meetings at some of these big brands.
You see Marco Critelli? Where'd he go? There's Marco over there, back there. That's so go see him. Marco from CAA.
Because these are definitely conversations that people are happening on a regular basis to try and capture much of what you just articulated.
That's what it's about. And nothing would drive me crazier over my years in radio when we would do the stuff ass backwards. So here's an example. Our salespeople would come to us and say, Capital One has a tagline they want to use. What's your tagline? What's in your wallet? Right. So what's in your wallet? So rather than say to me, go out and figure out a segment, some sort of device, something you can do on the air that will tie to that, they'll say, and here's their idea for it. They want you to do a segment where you count up what's in the wallet of the 3 best players in sports. You speculate about. So now you're telling me what I'm going to do. So to read your 15-second commercial, I now have to create a 5-minute segment that sucks, that no one is going to like. That and it's going to be incredibly obvious that this is not what I was otherwise doing. Whereas if you come to me and say, let's talk. My tagline is, what's in your wallet? Come back to Greeny, come back to me. You and your team come back to me in a week and give me 5 different ideas for a segment that we can sponsor, that will use that as its tagline, that is stuff you might otherwise do anyway, so it will seem organic and authentic. And that's what works. And look, I get it. I've always said, the sponsor is never wrong. If you tell me to do it, I'm going to do it, because you're writing a check to the people I work for. So I don't have a say in this, but I'm saying the most effective way to do it is if you take care of the messaging, because you know what that is. Let me take care of the content, because I know what that is. And let's put those together rather than you telling me you're going to have to stop doing content and deliver my message and then go back to doing content. In my experience, that's the worst way to do it.
So while you take a sip of water, we're going to start to wrap up this segment of the day. However, I did have a few.
I would be very disappointed if I were all of you, because this is the best segment you're going to get today. Who else is giving you gold like this? I'm just kidding.
But not really.
Well, I mean, I would like to think this is going to be the highlight. But, I mean, I don't know.
TBD, I guess.
I mean, do you have, like, Jay-Z coming later? I don't know.
Jay-Z and Beyonce, actually.
I don't know what you have.
Yeah.
Well, if so, then I'm staying.
So a couple of quick hitters, and we're going to get you out of here. Before Mike leaves and after we wrap up this panel, just FYI for everyone, if you do want to come say hello and take a picture with him, you're welcome to do so. You can just line up over here. You'll see Marlena in the fabulous ticket manager suit, and she will direct traffic, but no rush. You can take your time, and he will, of course, wait and say hello and take a picture with you.
I have nothing else to do.
He is not back on national TV in at least 12 hours, right? Yeah, I mean, you're good.
8 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah. Okay, so a few quick hitters. Who's going to win the World Series?
The Dodgers. What do you want from me? They're going to win. You could be from Toronto. You know they're going to win.
What is the Super Bowl matchup we're going to see in San Francisco?
I picked Detroit and Buffalo before the season started. I'll stay with that, although I'm a little worried about the Bills. But I think when you make a pick before the season starts, so long as it still seems reasonable, you should stay with it. So my preseason pick was Bills over Lions in Super Bowl, so I'll stay with that.
Sports story, can't be from today, that you're keeping your eye on over the next 12 months, that you would recommend we all keep our eye on, that you think is going to get bigger and bigger?
That's a good question. Is this the last one?
There's one more that you'll like even
Do
more.
the last one first, and then I'll come, because that'll give me more time to think about this one. I hadn't prepared. You sent me the questions. I missed that.
The last one, now the second to last one is...
The penultimate question is...
You have to choose. Would you rather watch the Jets in the Super Bowl or Northwestern in the Final Four, and why?
So, if it was just me, then my answer would be the Jets in the Super Bowl. There's nothing. So I used to say forever that all I wanted. So my dad and I, we had season tickets at Shea Stadium my whole childhood, and my mother would bundle me up literally in every ounce of clothing that I had in December, and we had this scratchy wool blanket that we would carry with us, and we would sit there in Shea Stadium freezing to death in December. And my dad always said a real fan stays till the end of the game. So we'd be losing 32-6 to Oakland in December, and we're sitting there to the very end of the game, and all I wanted in my life was to sit next to my dad and watch the Jets play in the Super Bowl. And unfortunately, at this point, I will only be able to do that in spirit. So that would have been first. But both of my kids went to Northwestern, too. So I went to Northwestern, and my daughter graduated in 2023, and my son just graduated in June of this year. So now when you factor that in, it would be such an incredible family experience for us all to go. And the Final Four is such a, like, we've gone whenever we've been in the tournament. There was one year I couldn't go because I had a little health thing, but we went to Salt Lake City, and then we played here at Barclays 2 years ago. In case any of you went to that, we gave UConn the toughest game anyone gave them that year. By the way, UConn won. That team would have won an NBA playoff series. So I would say Northwestern. And then as far as the stories that bear watching, I guess what jumps to mind would be the ever-changing, chaotic landscape of college sports as we know them, as regards things like NIL and players getting paid. Like we have a breakfast, so our show meeting is 6 o'clock in the morning at the new building at Hudson Square. And the cafeteria opens at 7. So we meet from 6 to 6:50 in a conference room. Then we all go upstairs at 7 o'clock, and we get breakfast, and we sit there and we eat.
Usually an omelet for you, right?
I get an omelet.
Yeah.
We got a guy, Benny, makes egg white omelets, like being at a Four Seasons in the Caribbean. And you're picking out your omelet every single day. It's a delight. But anyway, we have breakfast, and we sit there and we talk about stuff. And today, the conversation was about transfer portal and all that, and so and this quarterback wants $7 million to go from South Carolina somewhere else, and that still just doesn't sound right in my ear. Let me make it clear: I have zero issue with it. I am absolutely not opposed to collegiate athletes getting compensated. It's still just something that, having been a fan of sports all of my life, it still feels weird to hear it and to talk about it and to say it. But that is something that cannot just keep going the way it's going. There's just no way that in a completely unregulated, completely dysfunctional, completely chaotic, completely unorganized way, college sports is just going to continue to go like this. So something is going to happen. Now, what? I have no idea. But I think that's the thing to keep an eye on, because the current model is not sustainable.
All right, so that's definitely one to keep your eye on. Yes, this is definitely one of the highlights of the day. So a big thank you to Mike Greenberg. So with that, I think we're going to announce some prizes. Your prizes are going to be bundles of all of the books Mike has written, which he has signed for you today. And
quick question.
Yes.
Is my mic still on?
It can be.
Very quickly, because I'm going to be here and I'm going to be taking pictures and all that stuff. Where can I pee? Before we do that, because I need to run. I'm not going to be. This is going to take a while. I need a minute. That way, or is it at this door?
Out and left.
Okay. I'll be right back.
Leave your mic here. Yeah.